Okay, so let me see if I can get a good composition angle from this kitchen. First thing that you want to do is make sure that the projection is set at 2-point perspective. And then I just want to make sure I turn the sun brightness at 0. And then what I will also want to do is make the field of view to something like 60, move a little bit backwards. I'm just going to create a view real quick, and then later on we can adjust it so it's not a big deal. Okay, so this is how the Enscape curtains look at default. Obviously, it has some roughness modifications and all that. So what a lot of people try to do, and obviously it was my first instinct when I started using Enscape as well, was this opacity slider. And you try to actually move the opacity slider to create a realistic look for the actual curtain. Now, as you can see, as soon as the slider goes under 95% opacity, it does have a weird grayish or blackish look that it emits. And it's definitely not very realistic for the curtain material. So there's a way that we can actually fix this, and it is very simple, and it only needs 2 steps. So the first thing is we're going to go to the transparency section here at the Enscape materials editor, and we're going to switch from transmittance to cutout. And then once we switch to cutout, we're just going to go to texture, and we're going to find a mesh of the curtain material. So I'm just going to type in Google curtain material transparency map. So once I have downloaded this, I am going to go ahead in our cutout section, and we're going to load the texture straight into our Enscape window. And as you can see right now, it is looking much better than it previously did. But this is not all. There's another thing that we can do. So a lot of people tend to either do the type as foliage, which can also look good. I mean, it looks fine, but I honestly very rarely use this. It does emit the light inside from the exterior. However, I think that using the soft illuminated option as well is quite a good option, because it does emit light as well, and it looks like it's coming from the outside. So you can definitely switch between these options depending on the actual project. So we're just going to go through it real quick on how to actually get this look in fabric material. So we already have the texture applied to it. We're going to go ahead in the Enscape material editor, and I'm going to choose the fabric material that we have right here. So as you can see, one of the most important aspects for this fabric material is the bump map, since it is what it gives it depth and form. So let's see if it didn't have a bump map. As you can see, it's looking very flat and it's almost looking like plastic. But once we tone the bump map to 10, you can see that it's looking much better than previously. Obviously, you have to play with the roughness as well, because it does play a role in how realistic the fabric material looks. And maybe 100% is just way too much, 90% is too low. So I like to leave this one, for example, at 85%, which I believe gives it a good realistic look. Obviously, 80% doesn't look bad either. It's just somewhere in between those lines. Obviously, you have to change this, but you can always change this depending on the project, depending on the lighting. It is not a set value. So just remember this whenever you're using Enscape or even any other kind of rendering software. Remember that most of the values change depending on the project, the setting, the lighting, the composition. Do not set your mind at fixed values, because that will make your renders look not as best as they can. And now what we can do is I can either center the image like this, or I can also do a 1/3 composition. So if you want to make sure that you're getting the 1/3 or like the rule of thirds composition right, we can go to video editor and show grid lines. And the point of this is that we want to have the most important elements in the points where the lines intersect. So this basically divides the picture in 3 areas, vertically and horizontally, which are equal. And as I said, we want to make sure that we put the most important elements in these intersecting points. As you can see, now we do have the aspect ratio of 0.9 in the Enscape window. And then in the field of view, we can just leave it somewhere around 50. And then just do the rendering quality up to ultra. And now what we can do is we're going to go ahead in the view management. We can just place the camera somewhere here, and we can just click create view. If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
Did you know that HDRIs can affect your interior render?
So right here, I have another HDRI that is kind of more neutral, a little bit cloudy, and is just very plain. And right now I'm going to replace it with another HDRI. Let's choose this one. And then I'm going to choose another one as well. And as you can see, all of these do have a different look. So make sure you always use this for interior as well.
Improve your workflow just by this simple trick.
Now, something that you can do with the grass material is that you can change the way that it acts on our scene. So if I choose the grass material, we can make the height a little bit higher. You can also change the height variation if you want to make it more irregular. What you can also notice is that once we applied and we went onto the grass material in the material editor, you can see that all of these other options are available for material types that would automatically put the best settings and optimization for the actual material. material. Now, this was automatically selected for us because Enscape actually is able to identify materials through the naming of them.
Make your renders much more realistic by using HDRI.
To import them after you've downloaded them online, you can go at the sky setting, you can go at source in the horizon part, and you can click skybox, the brightest point as sun direction. So once we click this, the image will look more realistic. That basically detects which part of the HDRI is the brightness, and that's going to be detected as the sun.
The rendering quality will go up to ultra. We'll make the image in auto contrast, or we can turn on the highlights a little bit more, tone down the shadows, or maybe turn up the shadows, which looks much better. I think this has more contrast and it looks better. We'll do the saturation at 107. Color temperature is fine at default. We'll turn all of these at 0, 0, 0. The vignette will keep it, adds a little bit of more dramatic kind of vibe to it. I'm going to turn down this night sky brightness, shadow sharpness. We want the shadows as soft as possible. I will also turn up the ambient brightness, and that's pretty much it in terms of the visual setting.
So I'm going to go in the visual settings. I'm going to go over here at atmosphere, sun brightness at 0. Now let's go and fix up the whole composition. So I'm going to go at the field of view. I'm going to make it lower. Let's go for 60. Let's go a bit backwards. Let's go to ultra, the perspective at 2 points. Let's get closer to the actual bed. I'm gonna go ahead in the view management and just create a brand new scene.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
Spotlight from here onto there. Now, first thing, let me turn off auto exposure. Let me turn this type of exposure on, and now I'm going to try and multiply this on this side. 4x, multiply this vertically, 4x, select this and turn on the intensity. Also turn on the save frame tool. Now the normal map on this one is acting a bit weird. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move these definitely upwards and definitely backwards. I'm going to rotate them coming like so the lighting is coming a bit from the side. Now this does look more balanced and it does look better.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
I'm gonna go ahead and just use the field of view that is much lower, use the rendering quality ultra, and other than that I'm just going to try and find a good angle. Composition, you can always go to the video editor right here, use show grid lines, and then these will serve kind of as guidelines on how well you're positioning your whole model and all that. So now I'm going to go to camera, create view, and I'm going to type in view 1 16:9 because that is the aspect ratio of this. So I can do that kind of using this concrete and making the changes in the colors of it, maybe making it a little bit more beige. Now this is way too harsh and way too dark, so I can go ahead here and make some changes, make this even brighter. So something like this can work. And then something else that can definitely help along is if you go to the Enscape material editor, and I choose it right now, I can use the image fade option. I can go a little bit upwards and kind of fade it back to something like this. I'm going to go ahead and apply the displacement map or normal map of it, and then the roughness map as well. Maybe the roughness I will try to make it manually. Now this is way too much, so I'm gonna go for 0.5. I'll just make this something like 40, and then we will try and add a tint to it. So let me just make this a lot more onto here. This is way too much. This needs to be a lot warmer as well. Something like this. I think this is kind of close to what we have here. We do need to add some lighting on these lamps as well. So I'm going to go ahead here in the Enscape material editor. I'm going to select these. I will go ahead and apply a color on top of them. So let's just use something like this. And on the other side as well, let's go to soft illuminated. And as you can see, these are kind of turned on right now. We do not need them as much intensity as they had now. And then now we can just go ahead and add a sphere light on these, which will be very, very, very soft because it's very daytime, and harsh lighting will just look very, very fake. I'm going to play around a little bit with the visual settings. So I can use auto contrast, that is fine for now. The saturation, I can leave it a bit lower. And then color temperature, maybe I keep the saturation higher and then try to balance it with the color temperature. So something like this. I usually leave all of these off except the vignette, but let's just leave less flare on this one on. And then for the atmosphere settings, shadow sharpness all the way down. So this is exactly what is happening on the image over here.
I want to take this woman off, or I mean, it's a kitchen, so it's in the right place. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's just start doing a little bit of the materials now. Let's first try to find the flooring. We do have some flooring that is similar here in the Enscape material library, so we can just use this one. Let's change its orientation, this has to be 45 degrees and a lot larger.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
As you can see, now we do have the aspect ratio of 0.9 in the Enscape window. And then in the field of view, we can just leave it somewhere around 50. And then just do the rendering quality up to ultra. And now what we can do is we're going to go ahead in the view management. We can just place the camera somewhere here and we can just click create view.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
But in order to improve currents, we would need to select it, and I scroll down, you can see this transparency, and we would need to use a cutout. Just type in current transparency map. So if you search that in, and if you go to images, you can find this one, which is basically from the Enscape forum. And once you have this, you can just download this and then we can import it. And as you can see now, it does have transparency, but this doesn't look realistic yet. So I'm gonna do 0.02 by 0.02. And then one thing that will definitely make this a lot better, I myself like to use self-illuminated.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
There's a lot of work to be done here with the image settings. The auto contrast, we do need a bit of that. Saturation a little bit higher, or maybe even a bit lower. Even the color temperature needs to be a bit colder, I believe.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
Now I can choose this and I can make it larger either through the SketchUp tab, which is right here. So right now it's 100 centimeters by 100. So if I do 150 by 150, you can see that it changes the size on Enscape as well.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
Over here, if you can see this kind of tree icon, which is called the asset library in Enscape, I can just go ahead onto the vegetation category. Now there's two different ways that we can actually place the asset library in Enscape. We can just select them, as you can see, from the window from SketchUp, and I can just select it and just place, for example, a tree over here. Or the other thing that we can do is if I go in the Enscape window and if I go to the asset library in Enscape, but what we do not have in the SketchUp window is this multi-asset placement. So if I choose this, let's just try a bigger variety of trees. We can turn on the density, and as you can see now we do have the whole vegetation applied it. So now we just can click confirm placement. We can apply changes. If I go back to the composition, you can see that the whole scene is now populated and it does look way better.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
So I'm going to go at source and I'm going to go to skybox. We can load the skybox from file, and on HDRI3 I'm going to load skybox from file. And let's just choose another one. So I'm just gonna test out a few different ones. So even this one kind of has like a green tint to it, but I kind of like this lighting. I think this one will look actually best, and I didn't even intend to keep this one, but I do like how this one is sitting. It's almost like an early morning kind of lighting setup, and I think I'm gonna go ahead with this third one.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
So let's move on to the image section. So we can leave on auto contrast, which works fine. However, if you do want to have more control over the highlights or the shadows, we can use these two sliders, and I'm going to use auto contrast for this one, which does look a bit too lit up. However, now the saturation, let's keep it a little bit higher. So usually the Enscape default saturation is set way too low. And then the color temperature, the closer we go on the right, the colder it will be, and the closer we are to the left, the warmer it will be. So this one, I do think it needs a little bit more balance to go on the right side, so I'm going to leave it at something like this. And then all of these effects, I just turn all of them off completely because we do not need them. I do like to keep the vignette.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
And the first thing that I always like to do is I'm going to use 2-point perspective. Now let's lower the field of view as well. I believe that field of view is from 60 to 70 degrees, works fine. I'm going to leave it something like this. I'm going to go and edit the existing view that we have here. So I'm going to go over here, lower the camera down just a little bit, and then we can just click save. And now the view will be set up to the new angle that we did here.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
I think we're going to go ahead and set up the composition. First off, we'll need to have it with an aspect ratio of something like this. And let's just turn off the field of view. Let's just also split the screens in half. That way we can kind of see more clearly what's going on throughout the whole process.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
Time to see the power of how much difference good lighting can make. So now let's just try and turn on its intensity. But the thing is, these currents are blocking quite a bit of it. And now we're going to edit currents. Let me choose this, go to Enscape, Material Editor, take this off completely, and let's just use the cutout that we usually use, and then let's go and edit it with something like 0.1 by 0.1, and now we can go ahead and do self-illuminated. So something like this can definitely work.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.
I do feel like we have a bit of an issue with lighting here. However, I'm gonna go ahead and use some sphere lights underneath these ones, and I want to make these a bit warmer. So I'm gonna go to colors, and I'm gonna scroll down and apply this.
If you want to learn how to create realistic renders in just 14 days, click the link in bio.